The two witnesses of chapter 11 of the book of Revelation. What a mystery. These two witnesses have the power to shut heaven and power over water to turn it to blood, among other fantastic capabilities. Yet they are killed by a beast, laid dead in the street for 3.5 days. Then suddenly they stood up alive once again, causing great fear to those who saw them. Then a voice from heaven calls them, the newly resurrected witnesses, up to heaven. What the heck? Who are they? This video is to let you know that all the past theories you may have heard are wrong. Watch this video and you will find out the real meanings of these two mysterious witnesses, both their first appearances, then their second. If you have not seen any of the previous 6 videos in this course, I really encourage you to do so, if not before you watch this video, at least afterwards, just so you will know the full context. This is the table of contents for the whole course on the book of Revelation. There are 12 videos in all. This is the overall plan for the course. I don't recommend skipping any of the videos. This video that you are watching covers chapter 11, as you see within the pink box. Note that this video's table of contents is located in the description of the video. The description is located under the video title on YouTube. Some instructions how to access the description are on the next slide. This explanation uses a different one of my videos on YouTube as an example. You can see the video's title here below the video screen. This video's title is Interpretations of Nebuchadnezzar's Statue Are Wrong. Now the arrow is pointing to the description of that video. Only a couple lines of the description are shown. Then, if there is more to the description, you'll see 3 dots and the word More. Click on the word More to access the full contents of the description. That is where you'll find any links to other videos or websites or other information that I mentioned in this video. You probably will need to copy the website address and paste it into your internet browser. I don't believe YouTube allows direct links. The reckoning of time in the book of Revelation has been a mystery for its entire existence, nearly 2,000 years. There are 7 cycles of time frames. Chapter 11, all by itself, is 1 chronological cycle, the 4th out of 7 cycles. You are looking at the entirety of the book of Revelation as entered into an Excel spreadsheet, 1 verse per cell of the spreadsheet. Each row is a chapter in Revelation. Then each cell or group of cells are color-coded according to the religion or prophet the topic of those verse or verses are about. You can see the boxes filled with the text of the verses or paraphrased abbreviated highlights of the verses. Obviously, you cannot read it in this condensed image. The color coding of each box or a group of boxes revealed the structure of the book and the chronological cycles in it. This graphic shows the rationale and logic behind my conclusions about the chronology and structure of the book of Revelation. We will be reviewing the section in the bright blue box near the top. It highlights chapter 11 in the grid. If you want a lot more information about the whole structure and chronology in the book of Revelation, you can see that in video number 12 of this course. I have depicted the 7 chronological cycles in the book of Revelation here to remind you of the context of the time cycles. You can see in the middle on the left a red arrow pointing to chronological cycle number 4, which is chapter 11. Note that each cycle ends with a purple rectangle, which depicts the presence of the new Messiah, the returned Christ Spirit, in the text in those verses. That is he who sits on the throne, who is Bahá'u'lláh. The beginning of each cycle varies. The second cycle, chapters 6 and 7, begins with Judaism. The third cycle begins with either Judaism or Christianity. That's the one that Dr. Clark and I disagree about, the beginning of the cycle. That was explained in video number 6 of the course. But the chapter 11 cycle drops both Judaism and Christianity and starts out with pure Islam before the beast of the bottomless pit wreaks havoc upon it and corrupting it. The cycles rearrange and refocus after the end of each cycle. The fourth cycle, chapter 11, all by itself, begins with pure Islam. The fifth cycle begins with corrupted Islam. It contains chapters 12 through 16. The sixth cycle begins with corrupted Islam again. It contains chapters 17 through 20. Chapters 21 and 22 are the seventh cycle, which begins and ends with He who sits on the throne, Bahá'u'lláh, the Messiah of the latter days. Since chapter 11 begins with some happenings in Islam, I thought I'd cover just a few important dates in Islam. This timeline starts at year 1 of the Islamic calendar, which is the year 622 Common Era in the Western calendar. AH is for Anno Hijra. CE is for Common Era in the Western Gregorian calendar. Islamic dates are above the timeline, with the Gregorian equivalents noted below the timeline. This timeline shows the length of the 1,000 years as being the time of the duration of the Islamic dispensation. Those 1,000 years are counted starting with the date of 260 on the Islamic calendar, when the death of the 11th Imam of the Shia branch of Islam, or the disappearance or death of the 12th Imam, occurred. See the yellow arrow in the center of the slide. That is standing for those 1,000 lunar years duration. Note that those 1,000 years ends in the year 1260 in the Islamic calendar, which is the year 1844 in the Western calendar. This is according to the teachings in the Bahá'í faith. Note that the year 1844 is also the year of the declaration of the Bab, as his being the foretold return of the 12th Imam to the Shia Muslims, and his being the Elijah figure to the coming Messiah who would soon appear. The Bab is the Lamb of the Book of Revelation. The Book of Revelation makes many allusions to Islam that have gone unnoticed by Christian interpreters of Revelation. Some terms have hidden meanings that really refer to Islam. Here are some of them. Earth can symbolize Persia and Shia Islam, the predominant religion in Persia. The sea can mean Sunni Islam. Note that when the term day and night are used in Revelation, it can be a reference to Persia as the day and the Sunni or Ottoman Empire as night. The emblem of Persia is the lion holding a sword with a large bright sun behind it. Thus it also means day. The emblem of Sunni Islam in the Ottoman Empire is the crescent moon, thus the tie-in with the term night. For those of you who have not seen the introductory video, that's video number 1 of this course, we must take a short time here to explain the 3 woes of the book of Revelation. First, we'll review Revelation chapter 8, verse 13, wherein the 3 woes are first mentioned. This is the verse in Revelation where woes are first mentioned, chapter 8, verse 13. This is just after the 4th angel has sounded its trumpet. Then, quote, "And I," that's John of Patmos, "beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels, which are yet to sound." End quote. After the fourth angel sounds its trumpet in the previous verse, verse 12, another angel announces that in this verse 13 that three woes are to come to humankind, all of humanity on planet Earth. It's important to note there are also three trumpet blasts yet to sound at this point, and there are yet three woes to be announced. It seems quite logical to think that each of the next three trumpet blasts will bring a woe with it, and that is exactly what happens. That started in chapter 8. Here in chapter 11 we have one trumpet blast left to be sounded, and one last message about the woes. From the book of Ezekiel, chapter 30, verses 2 and 3, we get this, quote, "Son of man, prophesy and say, Thus says the Lord God, Wail, woe to the day, for the day is near, even the day of the Lord is near." End quote. A day of the Lord is obviously when the Messiah would come according to the Old Testament, such as indicated in the book of Malachi, chapter 4, verse 5, quote, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord." End quote. Therefore, a woe is the appearance of a prophet or manifestation of God on earth. Here are the other two verses that mention the coming of the three woes. Revelation chapter 9, verse 12, quote, "One woe is past, and behold, there come two woes more hereafter." End quote. Then some intervening verses review some events with the coming of the second woe. Later in this chapter 11, verse 14, it abruptly states, quote, "The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly." End quote. Then in the very next verse, the seventh trumpet is sounded, and it is announced that, quote, "The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever." End quote. Meaning that the Messiah of the latter days has been revealed in this material world. In the chronology of Revelation, the first foretold manifestation of God appears, reveals his revelation, then exits. His time on earth ends. Chapter 9, verse 12 states that. Then at some point in time, two more manifestations of God would appear in quick succession. Chapter 11, verse 14 states that the second woe, the second manifestation of God, has passed. His dispensation is over in this vision story. Then it foretells that very quickly thereafter, the third woe, the third manifestation of God, would appear soon after the second one has passed from the scene. Exactly who these last two of the three foretold manifestations of God were will be revealed according to the Bahá'í faith. You might wonder, why would such good news be called a woe? A new manifestation of God brings a new message to humanity. Often this results in the social and power structures being disrupted and threatened, thus causing woe to the society. The appearance of a new prophet of God with a new revelation will result in changes that many will find difficult to deal with. The smoke and clouds created by these events interrupt the ability of many to recognize the new prophet and the new heaven and the new earth that arises. The people will be woeful about their lack of spiritual perception when they finally recognize them long after the fact of their appearances. The book of Revelation tells us that there would be three manifestations or prophets of God in the future to John of Patmos, that is. That's woe number 1, woe number 2, and woe number 3. As to their identities, woe number 1 was prophet with capital P, who was Muhammad. Woe number 2 was prophet number 2, who was the lamb of the book of Revelation, who was the Bob. And woe number 3, prophet number 3, was he who sits on the throne, who was Bahá'u'lláh. From the authoritative writings of the Bahá'í Faith, an answer to the question of what a woe is, and lots more. Quote, the first woe was the advent of the apostle of God, Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, peace be upon him. The second woe was that of the Bab, upon him be glory and praise. The third woe is the great day of the advent of the Lord of hosts and the revelation of the promised beauty. The explanation of this matter is provided in the 30th chapter of Ezekiel, where it is said, the word of the Lord came again unto me, saying, Son of man, prophesy, and say, Thus saith the Lord God, Howl ye, woe worth the day, for the day is near, even the day of the Lord is near. You may wonder who this Abdul-Baha was. Abdul-Baha was born in 1844 and passed away in 1921. He was the son of Bahá'u'lláh. Baha'u'lláh designated him to be the head of the faith, the Bahá'í Faith, after Baha'u'llah's passing in 1892. Baha'u'lláh bestowed upon Abdul-Baha special knowledge and abilities. Abdul-Baha had a very special, divinely ordained station in this new faith of God, called the Bahá'í Faith. Baha'u'lláh designated him the position of the center of his covenant. The interpretation of chapter 11 is quoted from the writings of Abdul-Baha, from his book, Some Answered Questions. Dr. Clark, in his book, also quotes Abdul-Baha. Abdul-Baha goes through chapter 11 verse by verse to explain it all. I think you'll find his written comments to be logical and revealing. This explanation is available for free online as well. I will put the link to it in the description for the video. The description can be accessed below this video's title on YouTube. Just click on the word ... more. I do recommend watching this video since I also provide some additional explanatory comments and graphics. Note that Abdul-Baha was an authorized interpreter of the Bahá'í writings. His explanation of chapter 11 of the book of Revelation is presented here in direct quotes from Abdul-Baha's commentary, which he gave to an early Bahá'í, Laura Clifford Barney, while she was on a visit to Akka in the years 1904 to 1906. Also note that Abdul-Baha provided commentaries on a portion of chapter 12 of the book of Revelation and chapter 11 of the book of Isaiah, as well in the book Some Answered Questions. How this information will be presented here is as follows. First, a quotation from chapter 11 will be given. Note that the King James Version of the Bible is used by Abdul-Baha. Then Abdul-Baha's commentary, direct quotes, will be given. Additional comments, explanations, and graphics by me may be given if needed. More about the design of this presentation. Quotations from the book of Revelation will be in bold black lettering with yellow background or highlighting. Verse numbers will be noted in red numbers at the beginning of verses. The commentary by Abdul-Baha that explains the verse or part of a verse will have a white background with black lettering. Some terms or phrases may be in bold lettering underlined or in a color font to call attention to them, or combinations of 2 or 3 emphasis methods. When Abdul-Baha's commentary is very long, it will be spread over 2 or more slides and will have the white background with black font. Hopefully you'll catch on quickly after the first couple slides. Additional comments or explanations by me, the video narrator and producer, will have a black background with white font, usually, as you see at the bottom. All special graphics will be by me to hopefully clarify prophecy math or other concepts. A heads up here, the virtue of patience will be needed on your part as we start our review of the verses of chapter 11. For verses 1 through 3, Abdu'l-Bahā's explanation of their meanings is fairly lengthy. He starts with some background information. However, you will find it quite interesting, and it sets the stage for understanding events in the remainder of chapter 11. Most of Abdu'l-Bahā's explanations of the remaining 16 verses are not as lengthy. And chapter 11 begins. Chapter 11, verses 1 and 2, quote, "And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise, and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread under foot 42 months." End quote. The author's explanation of verses 1 and 2, quote, "By this reed is meant the perfect man, and the reason for his being likened to a reed is that when the latter is entirely freed and emptied of its pith, it becomes capable of producing wondrous melodies, like a flute. Moreover, these songs and airs proceed not from the reed itself, but from the player who blows into it. In the same way, the sanctified heart of that blessed being is free and empty of all save God, is averse to and exempt from the attachment to every selfish inclination, and is intimately acquainted with the breath of the divine Spirit. That which he utters proceeds not from himself, but from the ideal player, and from divine revelation. Hence he is likened to a reed, and that reed is like a rod. That is, it is the succor of the weak and is a support to the body of the world. It is the rod of the true shepherd by which he guards his flock and leads it about in the pastures of the kingdom. Then it is said that the angel addressed him, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and them that worship therein. That is, weigh and gauge. To gauge is to determine the quantity of a thing. Thus the angel said, Weigh the Holy of Holies and the altar, and them that are worshiping therein. That is, investigate their true condition, discover their rank and station, their attainments, their perfections, their conduct, and their attributes, and acquaint thyself with the mysteries of those holy souls who abide in the Holy of Holies, the station of purity and sanctity. Court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. When in the beginning of the 7th century of the Christian era, Jerusalem was conquered, the Holy of Holies, that is, the edifice that Solomon had erected, was outwardly preserved, but its outer court was seized and given over to the Gentiles. And the holy city shall they tread under foot 42 months. That is, the Gentiles will seize and subdue Jerusalem for 42 months, or 1260 days, or each day being equivalent to a year, 1260 years, which is the duration of the Quranic dispensation. For according to the text of the Bible, each day is a year, as it is said in Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 6, quote, Thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year. End quote. My injection here, just to emphasize that this time prophecy math is consistent with Jewish and Christian prophecy experts. That is, if a prophecy in the Bible states that a given period will be 1260 days in length, that means that it is actually 1260 years until its fruition. One prophetic day equals one actual earth year. This is a prophecy concerning the duration of the dispensation of Islam, when Jerusalem was trodden underfoot, meaning that it was dishonored, while the Holy of Holies remained preserved, guarded, and honored. This state of affairs continued until the year 1260. This 1260 years is a prophecy concerning the advent of the Bab, the gate leading to Bahá'u'lláh, which took place in the year AH 1260. As the period of 1260 years has been completed, the holy city of Jerusalem is now beginning to prosper and flourish again. Anyone who saw Jerusalem 60 years ago and who sees it again today will recognize how it has come to prosper and flourish, and how it has regained its honor. Some side notes here. The author mentions seeing Jerusalem 60 years ago as opposed to today. The author wrote this explanation in the early 1900s, over 100 years ago. The two individuals mentioned, highlighted in red, the Bab and Bahá'u'lláh, are not the initial two witnesses. The Bab and Bahá'u'lláh are, respectively, the Lamb and He who sits on the throne, mentioned elsewhere in the book of Revelation. They are, respectively, the Elijah figure, the forerunner to the Messiah of the latter days, and the Messiah himself. The author goes on to say, "This is the outward sense of these verses of the Revelation of John, but they also have an inward interpretation and a symbolic meaning, which is as follows. The religion of God consists of two parts. One is the very foundation and belongs to the spiritual realm. That is, it pertains to spiritual virtues and divine qualities. This part suffers neither change nor alteration. It is the Holy of Holies, which constitutes the essence of the religion of Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Christ, Muhammad, the Bab, and Bahá'u'lláh, and which will endure throughout all the prophetic dispensations. It will never be abrogated, for it consists in spiritual rather than material truth. It is faith, knowledge, certitude, justice, piety, high-mindedness, trustworthiness, love of God, and charity. It is mercy to the poor, assistance to the oppressed, generosity to the needy, and upliftment of the fallen. It is purity, detachment, humility, forbearance, patience, and constancy. These are divine qualities. These commandments will never be abrogated, but will remain in force and effect for all eternity. These human virtues are renewed in every dispensation, for at the close of each dispensation the spiritual law of God, which consists in the human virtues, vanishes in substance and persists only in form. Thus, at the end of the Mosaic dispensation, which coincided with the advent of Christ, the true religion of God vanished from among the Jews, leaving behind a form without a spirit. The Holy of Holies was no more, but the outer court of the temple, which signifies the outward form of the religion, fell into the hands of the Gentiles. In the same way, the very heart of the religion of Christ, which consists in the greatest human virtues, is no more, but its outward form has remained in the hands of the priests and monks. Likewise, the foundation of the religion of Muhammad is no more, but its outward form remains in the hands of the Muslim divines. Those foundations of the religion of God, however, which are spiritual and consist in human virtues, are never subject to abrogation, but are eternal and everlasting, and are renewed in every prophetic dispensation. The second part of the religion of God, which pertains to the material world and which concerns such things as fasting, prayer, worship, marriage, divorce, manumission, which means release from slavery, legal rulings, transactions, and penalties and punishments for murder, assault, theft, and injury, is changed and altered in every prophetic dispensation and may be abrogated, for policies, transactions, punishments, and other laws are bound to change according to the exigencies, the needs of the time. Briefly, what is meant by the term Holy of Holies is that spiritual law which can never be changed or abrogated, and what is meant by the Holy City is the material law which may indeed be abrogated, and this material law, the Holy City, was to be trodden underfoot for 1260 years. End quote. Note that time period of 1260 years. More explanation of this will be given shortly. And some explanatory information is next in the next few slides. Then we will resume Abdu'l-Bahá's commentary. This is a model of one of many ideas of what Herod's temple would have looked like. Herod's temple was in existence when Jesus Christ walked the earth. He actually walked on the temple grounds. In verse 2, the temple is being used symbolically, not literally, since at the time of this vision to John, which occurred around 95 Common Era, the temple in Jerusalem had already been destroyed by the Romans. That occurred in 70 Common Era. In the next slide, I will explain a bit more about the symbolic meanings referred to by our author as the holy place. Verse 2 states that the court which is without the temple leave out. This is an Old English way of saying that the court outside of the temple, meaning the outer court, is to be left out, and it is this outer court, sometimes referred to as the courtyard of the Gentiles, that is symbolic of Jerusalem. But Jerusalem here means the whole land of Israel, not just the city of Jerusalem, that will be trodden by the Gentiles for 42 months. We already know that 42 months means 1260 lunar years. Gentiles means anyone who is not Jewish. And we know that not long after Muhammad brought the faith of Islam, the Muslims conquered the area of the world once called Israel. For the better part of 1260 lunar years, it was mostly under Muslim rule from 638 Common Era until 1917 Common Era, when it was conquered by the British during World War I. The duration of Muslim and occasionally a few other Gentile groups occupation lasted a period of almost exactly 1260 lunar years. The year 1844 Common Era started the return of many Jews to the land of ancient Israel with the start of the Zionist movement. As persecution increased in Europe, more Jews returned to this area of the world. The inner court and Holy of Holies was not to be trodden down by the Gentiles, meaning that the faith of Judaism, the devotion of its followers, would not be trodden and would survive until the end of the 42 months, at least. Another explanation, equally true, is an inward or symbolic meaning of the outer and inner courts of the Holy City. The verse speaking about the inner and outer courts means that the law of God is divided into two parts. The spiritual law, which is the inner court, including the Holy of Holies, and the material law, which is the outer court. The spiritual laws are those that address the spiritual virtues and divine qualities that do not ever change or alter. This is the Holy of Holies, which is the essence of the law of Adam, Abraham, Moses, Christ, Muhammad, the Bab, and Bahá'u'lláh. The last two are the prophets of the Bahá'í faith. The material law is the outer court of the Holy City. It's the second part of the religion of God, and that's for all revealed faiths, by the way, and refers to the material world. These are material laws revealed by the prophets, such things as fasting, prayer, forms of worship, marriage and divorce, more the behavioral laws within human society. This part of the law of God that refers to material things is modified in each prophetic cycle by that prophet in accordance with the needs of the people and place in which that revelation is revealed. The spiritual law never changes. the material laws change with each manifestation of God as the times and human society needs. And this is a graphic to explain this symbolism. The outer court is the material law of God, and the inner court, the holy and the holy of holies, symbolize the spiritual law of God. So it was the second type of the law of God, the material law, which is described as the outer court of the holy city that was to be trodden underfoot for 1260 years. Revelation chapter 11, verse 3, quote, "And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days," which is 1260 days, "clothed in sackcloth," end quote. 1,260 days equals 1,260 days, which means 1,260 earth years. The author's explanation, quote, "By these 2 witnesses are intended Muhammad, the messenger of God, and Ali, the son of Abu Talib. In the Quran it is said that God addressed Muhammad saying, quote, 'We made thee a witness, a herald, and a warner,' end quote." That's from the Quran, Surah or chapter 48, verse 8. That is, we have established thee as one who bears witness, who imparts the glad tidings of that which is to come, and who warns of the wrath of God. A witness means one by whose affirmation matters are ascertained. The commandments of these 2 witnesses were to be followed for 1,260 days, each day corresponding to a year. Now Muhammad was the root and Ali the branch, like Moses and Joshua. It is said they were clothed in sackcloth, meaning that they appeared to wear not a new raiment, but an old one. In other words, they would initially appear to be of no consequence in the eyes of other peoples, and their cause would not seem new, for the spiritual principles of the religion of Muhammad correspond to those of Christ in the Gospel, and his material commandments correspond for the most part to those of the Torah. This is the symbolism of the old raiment. Just a note here. Keep in mind that the 2 witnesses are defined as to who or what they are in other verses in chapter 11. In the very next verse, verse 4, the 2 witnesses are called 2 olive trees and 2 lampstands, or candlesticks, depending on which version of the Bible you're reading. And later, in verse 10, the 2 witnesses are called prophets. Verse 4, quote, "These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth," end quote. Note that some versions of the Bible translate it as 2 lamp holders rather than 2 candlesticks. Abdu'l-Bahā's explanation, quote, "These 2 souls have been likened to olive trees, since all the lamps of that time were lit at night with olive oil. In other words, these are 2 souls from whom the oil of divine wisdom, which is the cause of the illumination of the world, will appear, and through whom the lights of God will shine bright and resplendent. Thus have they also been likened to candlesticks. The candlestick is the locus of the light and the place from whence it emanates. In the same way, the light of guidance would shine resplendent from these luminous countenances. They are standing before God, that is, they have arisen in his service and are educating his creatures. For instance, they so educated the barbarous desert-dwelling tribes of the Arabian Peninsula as to cause them to attain the loftiest heights of human civilization at the time, and to spread their fame and renown throughout the world. Verse 5, quote, "And if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and devoureth their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed," end quote. Abdu'l-Bahā's explanation, quote, "This means that no soul would be able to withstand their might. That is, should anyone seek to subvert their teachings or their law, he would be overcome and defeated by virtue of that law which proceeds, whether in brief or in full, from their mouth." In other words, they would issue a command that would destroy any enemy that would attempt to harm or oppose them. And so it came to pass, for their opponents were all vanquished, dispersed, and destroyed, and these two witnesses were outwardly assisted by the power of God. Verse 6, quote, "These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will." End quote. These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy. This means that they would rule supreme in that age. In other words, the law and teachings of Muhammad and the exposition and commentaries of Ali are a heavenly grace. Should they wish to bestow this grace, it is in their power to do so. And should they wish otherwise, no rain will fall, and by rain is meant here the outpouring of grace. As to the phrase, "and have power over waters to turn them to blood," this means that the prophethood of Muhammad was similar to that of Moses, and the power of Ali like that of Joshua. That is, it was in their power, had they so desired, to turn the waters of the Nile into blood for the Egyptians and the deniers, or in other words, to turn in consequence of their ignorance and pride that which was the source of their life into the cause of their death. Thus the sovereignty, wealth, and power of Pharaoh and of his people, which were the source of that nation's life, became, as a result of their opposition, denial, and pride, the very cause of their death, ruin, destruction, degradation, and wretchedness. Hence, these two witnesses have power to destroy nations. And to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. This means that they would also be endowed with outward power and ascendancy, that they might school the workers of iniquity and the embodiments of oppression and tyranny. For God had granted these two witnesses both outward might and inward power, and so it is that they reformed and educated the wicked, bloodthirsty, iniquitous Arabs of the desert who were like ravening wolves and beasts. Verse 7, quote, "And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them." End quote. And when they shall have finished their testimony, that is, when they have accomplished that which they were bidden, and have delivered the divine message, and promoted the religion of God, and spread abroad his heavenly teachings, so that the signs of spiritual life might be manifested in the souls of men, the light of human virtues might shine forth, and these desert tribes might achieve substantive progress. The beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them. By this beast is meant the Umayyads, who assailed these witnesses from the pit of error. And indeed it came to pass that the Umayyads assailed the religion of Muhammad and the truth of Ali, which consist in the love of God. Then the phrase, "the beast shall make war against them," that's the two witnesses. In the comment, by this is intended a spiritual war, meaning that the beast would act in complete opposition to the teachings, conduct, and character of these two witnesses, to such an extent that the virtues and perfections that had been diffused among the peoples and nations by virtue of their power would entirely vanish, and animal qualities and carnal desires would predominate. Therefore this beast would wage war against them and gain ascendancy, meaning that the darkness of the error propagated by this beast would prevail throughout the world and slay those two witnesses. That is, it would extinguish their spiritual life amidst the people, obliterate their divine laws and teachings, and trample underfoot the religion of God, leaving behind naught but a dead and soulless body." End quote. Now for some more information about the beast that the author identifies as the Umayyads. The Umayyads were a large, powerful clan of tribes in Arabia. The head of the clan at the time of Muhammad was a man named Abu Sufyan, who was the emir or chieftain of Mecca, meaning he was a king of Mecca, so to speak. Abu Sufyan and his son Muawiyah were also wealthy merchants who became wealthy from the idol-worshipping pilgrims who would go to Mecca as part of their pilgrimage. This was well before Muhammad's faith, Islam, had made inroads into the population. When Muhammad first started teaching his revelation from God, most of the people in this area of Arabia were idol worshippers, many different idols. Islam is very strictly monotheistic, one God, no worshipping of idols or images. Abu Sufyan and his son and others considered Muhammad as an enemy due to his teaching of one God and his vehement stance against idol worship. It endangered their livelihoods. Muhammad's teachings endangered the wealth of the Umayyads and others. After much warfare, Muhammad's forces won out. Abu Sufyan and Muawiyah pledged allegiance to Muhammad, a false allegiance. Their treachery never dimmed. Muawiyah became the personification of the Antichrist of the Muhammadan dispensation. Thus the Umayyads are deemed to be the first of the three bad beasts of the book of Revelation. That's the red dragon of chapter 12. It is very important to understand that in Bible prophecies, beasts symbolize the kings and rulers of the earth, and or their empires or kingdoms. That's from the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 17, quote, "Those great beasts which are four kings which arise out of the earth," end quote. The type of king or ruler determines the type of animal that is used to symbolize that king or ruler, or the nation, empire. Here are some examples how this works in Bible prophecies. A weak or meek ruler is likely to be symbolized by a lamb. A strong, predatory king could be a leopard. A strong, ferocious, and evil king could be a dragon, or similar symbolisms. Verse 8, quote, "And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified." End quote. By their dead bodies is meant the religion of God, and by the street, exposure to public view. Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified, refers to the land of Syria, and especially to Jerusalem, for the Umayyads had their seat of power in this land, and it was here that the religion of God and the divine teachings first disappeared, leaving behind a soulless body. Their bodies refers to the religion of God, which remained as a dead and soulless body. Verse 9 of chapter 11, quote, "And they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves." End quote. As was already explained, in the terminology of the sacred scriptures, 3 days and a half signifies 3 years and a half, and 3 years and a half represents 42 months, and 42 months, 1260 days. Since according to the explicit text of the Bible, each day is equivalent to a year, This means that for 1260 years, which is the duration of the Quranic dispensation, the nations, tribes, and peoples would behold their bodies. That is, they would keep the religion of God before their eyes, but would not act in accordance with it. Yet they would not suffer these bodies, the religion of God, to be laid to rest in the grave. That is, they would hold fast to its outward form, and not let it entirely vanish from their midst, nor allow the body to be wholly destroyed and annihilated. Rather, they would forsake its reality while outwardly preserving its name and remembrance. That which is intended here are such kindreds, peoples, and nations as were gathered beneath the shadow of the Quran. These are they who would not allow the cause and religion of God to be destroyed and annihilated outwardly as well. Thus some manner of prayer and fasting was practiced among them, but the very foundations of the religion of God, which are a goodly character, upright conduct, and the knowledge of divine mysteries, had disappeared. The light of human virtues, which proceeds from the love of and knowledge of God, had been extinguished. The darkness of oppression and tyranny, of carnal desires and satanic attributes, prevailed, and the body of the religion of God, like unto a corpse, was exposed to public view. For 1260 days, each day being a year, that is, for the duration of the Islamic dispensation, all that these two persons had established as the foundations of the religion of God was forfeited by their followers. To such an extent were the traces of human virtues, which are the bestowals of God and which constituted the spirit of this religion, erased, that truthfulness, justice, love, concord, purity, sanctity, detachment, and all the heavenly attributes vanished from their midst, and what remained of the religion was mere prayer and fasting. This condition lasted for 1260 years, which corresponds to the dispensation of the Quran. It is as though these two persons had died and their bodies were left without a soul. You have had several time periods thrown at you in this video. They are delineated here in the column on the left as top left, time, times, and half a time. If you look at the middle column, you'll see that this time period is found in the book of Daniel in chapters 7 and 12, and in the book of Revelation, chapter 12. Bible prophecy experts have long ago determined that it means that a time is equivalent to 1 earth year, times, plural, means 2 years, and half a time is 6 months. So it equals 3.5 years, which equals 42 months, which in turn equals 1260 days. Note that there are many similarities, especially in time prophecies, between the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation. Next row down, 1260 days, which equals 1260 Earth lunar years. And that term is used in several times in chapters 11 and 12 in Revelation. Next row, 42 prophetic months of 30 days each equals 1260 days. Thus it means 1260 lunar Earth years. Bottom row, 3.5 days equals 3.5 years, which in turn equals 1260 days. The time period of 3.5 days is found basically in chapter 11. In short, all these terms in the left column found in the Bible time prophecies mean the same period of time, 1260 lunar Earth years. There's not just the same length of time, but actually the same period of time, and they end or culminate or bear fruit in the same Earth year. This timeline begins on the left at year 500 of the Gregorian or Western calendar. Muhammad began teaching his revelation from God around the year 613 Common Era. Muhammad chose a calendar for all Islam as a lunar calendar that began in the year 622 Common Era in the Western calendar. That's from when he had to flee Mecca and go to Medina due to murderous threats against his life. The beginning of the Islamic calendar is now shown there on the left as it relates to the Gregorian calendar. The 1260-day prophecy of the duration of the Quranic dispensation begins with the start of the Islamic calendar in that year 622 Common Era. It's a lunar calendar, and because we must add the 1260 lunar years, we get to the Gregorian year of 1844. That's 1844 Common Era. Stay there on the bottom left. It's an important year, and you're going to hear more about it. Verse 10, quote, "And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them, and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth." End quote. By them that dwelt on the earth is meant other peoples and nations, such as those of Europe and of distant Asian lands, who, seeing that the character of Islam had entirely changed, that the religion of God had been forsaken, that virtue, decency, and honor had vanished, and that characters had been subverted, rejoiced that the morals of the Muslims had been corrupted, and that they stood therefore to be vanquished by other nations. And this indeed came to pass in most conspicuous manner. Witness how this people who once wielded supreme power have been abased and subjugated. The other nations shall send gifts to one another, meaning that they would help each other, for these two prophets, meaning the two witnesses, tormented them that dwelt upon the earth. That is, they subdued and subjugated the other peoples and nations of the earth. Verse 11 of chapter 11, quote, "And after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them." End quote. 3 days and a half, as we explained earlier, is 1260 years. These two persons whose bodies were laying soulless, that is, the teachings and the religion that Muhammad had established and that Ali had promoted, whose reality had vanished, and of which only an empty form had remained, were again endowed with spirit, that is to say, those teachings were established anew. That is, the spirituality of the religion of God that had become materiality, the virtues that had become vices, the love of God that had become hatred, the light that had become darkness, the divine qualities that had become satanic attributes, the justice that had become tyranny, the mercy that had become malice, the sincerity that had become hypocrisy, the guidance that had become error, the purity that had become carnality. All these divine teachings, heavenly virtues, and perfections and spiritual bounties were, after 3.5 days, which by the terminology of the sacred scriptures is 1260 years, renewed by the advent of the Bab and by the allegiance of Qudus. Qudus, by the way, was the chief disciple of the Bab. Thus did the breezes of sanctity waft, the light of truth shine, the life-giving springtime arrive, and the morn of guidance dawn. These two dead bodies were once again quickened to life, and these two great personages, one the founder, the Bab, and the other the promoter, Qudus, arose and were as two candlesticks, for they illumined the whole world with the light of truth. Verse 12, quote, "And they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, Come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them." end quote. Meaning that from the invisible heaven they heard the voice of God saying, "You have accomplished all that was called for with regard to educating the people and conveying the glad tidings of that which is to come. You have delivered my message to the people, raised the call of truth, and fulfilled your every obligation. Now, even as Christ, you must lay down your lives in the path of the beloved and suffer a martyr's death. And so that sun of reality and the moon of guidance," that's the Bab and his chief disciple Qudus, "both set, Christ-like, beneath the horizon of the supreme sacrifice and ascended to the realm of heaven," meaning they were both martyred, killed for proclaiming the new faith of God. And their enemies beheld them. That is, many of their enemies realized after their martyrdom the sublimity of their station and the excellence of their virtues, and testified to their greatness and their perfections. Verse 13, quote, "In the same hour was there a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted, and gave glory to the God of heaven." End quote. This earthquake occurred in Shiraz, Persia, which was the birthplace of the Bab, after the martyrdom of the Bab. The city was plunged into turmoil and many people were killed. Great agitation ensued, moreover, from disease, cholera, scarcity, famine, starvation, and other afflictions, an agitation the like of which had never before been witnessed. And the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the God of heaven. When the earthquake took place in Fars, the survivors were wailing and lamenting day and night, and were occupied with praising and imploring God. So great was their fear and agitation that at night they could find no rest or composure. Note, Fars is a province of Persia in southwest Persia, which is modern-day Iran, and it's where the city of Shiraz is located. So, what happened in the year 1844? In May of 1844, a young man in Shiraz, Persia, proclaimed that he was the expected Mahdi, that's the 12th Imam, that's expected by Muslims to redeem Islam. He also announced that another prophet would soon appear, greater than he, who would be the expected Messiah to the Jews, Christians, Muslims, and other faiths. Over 6 years, he accrued a large following in Persia. Some estimate possibly into the hundreds of thousands of followers. These devoted followers, called Babis, alarmed the Muslim clergy and government leadership, including the Shah himself and his prime minister. Government and religious leaders felt threatened by the Bab's popularity. Apparently, they feared for their positions in society. The Bab had 18 disciples called the Letters of the Living. His chief disciple was a man named Qudus. Remember Qudus. He, along with the Bab, will be mentioned in some verses coming up. The Bab is also the lamb in the book of Revelation. Just as lambs can be a sacrifice animal, the Bab sacrificed his life to bring his message from God. The Bab was killed by the Persian army on July 9, 1850, upon the order of the Shah and his prime minister, who had hopes, along with the Muslim clergy, that the Bab's death would put an end to this new faith, called at that time the Babi faith. Verse 14, quote, "The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly." End quote. The first woe was the advent of the apostle of God, Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, peace be upon him. The second woe was that of the Bab, upon him be glory and praise. The third woe is the great day of the advent of the Lord of hosts and the revelation of the promised beauty, meaning Bahá'u'lláh. The explanation of this matter is provided in the 30th chapter of Ezekiel, where it is said, quote, "The word of the Lord came again unto me, saying, Son of man, prophesy, and say, Thus saith the Lord God, Howl ye, woe worth the day, for the day is near, even the day of the Lord is near." End quote. And that's from verses 1 to 3 in chapter 30 of Ezekiel. It is therefore evident that the day of woe is the day of the Lord, for in that day woe is upon the heedless, the sinners, and the ignorant. That is why it is said, The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. This third woe is the day of the manifestation of Bahá'u'lláh, the day of God, and it is near to the day of the appearance of the Bab. And here are the three woes prophesied as coming in the book of Revelation. Woe number 1 was Muhammad, who was one of the two witnesses that we're covering in this chapter, in this video. Also described as the lampstand, olive trees of the book of Revelation, as well as foretold in the books of Genesis, Deuteronomy, Daniel, and elsewhere. Woe number 2 was the Bab, who is the Lamb of the book of Revelation, the Christ returned in the station of Elijah, the forerunner of the Messiah, the Son of Man, per Luke chapter 9, verse 26. Woe number 3 was Bahá'u'lláh, which in English means the glory of God. He fulfills the prophecies of the coming of the one who sits on the throne, the Lord of hosts, the Messiah, the Christ returned in the station of the Father. Again, from Luke chapter 9, verse 26. The chronology of the book of Revelation has been completely misunderstood until now. Chapter 11 is one segment of the chronology, which I refer to as cycles or rounds. Chapter 11 is cycle number 4 of 7 cycles. This is an illustration of chapter 11's chronology. The yellow box on the far left simply shows that this row is chapter 11. Each box to its right is a verse in chapter 11, paraphrased to save space. There are 19 verses. The pink row at the bottom of the verses shows the verse number. The verses are color-coded by subject matter. The green box's subject matter deals with verses 1 through 6. These verses concern happenings with Muhammad and Islam before the effects of beast number 1 and number 2. You'll learn about beast number 2 in the chapter 12 video if you watch it. The pale green boxes are verses 7 through 10, and their subject matter concerns Islam after the effects of beast number 1 on the leadership of the religion of Islam. Then verses 11 through 13 are about the Lamb, the Bab, who is woe number 2. Verses 12 and 13 state, quote, "And they heard a great voice from heaven, saying unto them, Come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. And the same hour was there a great earthquake. And the 10th part of the city fell, and the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted, and gave glory to the God of heaven." End quote. These verses speak of the martyrdom of the Bab and Qudus, his chief disciple. They are the resurrected two witnesses, if you recall. So with verse 12, the Lamb sacrificed his life to bring his revelation to the world and to announce the coming of the Messiah for very soon after him. Now the solid pink rectangle states, "The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly." End quote. This confirms that the Lamb, the Bab, was the second woe. Now with the next set of verses, 15 through 19, the Bab is gone from the scene, and he who sits on the throne makes his appearance. The Messiah, Bahá'u'lláh, woe number 3, appears after the Lamb. More about verses 15 through 19 shortly. The Bab and Bahá'u'lláh, respectively, show up at the end of chronological cycle number 4, which is chapter 11 as previously mentioned. Verse 15, quote, "And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven, saying, The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever." End quote. That angel refers to human souls who have been endowed with heavenly attributes and invested with angelic nature and disposition. Voices will be lifted up, and the appearance of the divine manifestation will be proclaimed and noised abroad. It will be announced that this day is the day of the advent of the Lord of hosts, and this dispensation, the merciful dispensation of the divine providence. It has been promised and recorded in all the sacred books and scriptures that in this day of God, his divine and spiritual sovereignty will be established. The world will be renewed. A fresh spirit will be breathed into the body of creation. The divine springtime will be ushered in. The clouds of mercy will rain down. The sun of truth will shine forth. The life-giving breezes will blow. The world of humanity will be arrayed in a new garment. The face of the earth will become even as the highest paradise. Humanity will be educated. War, dissension, strife, and contention will vanish. Truthfulness, uprightness, peace, and godliness will prevail. Love, concord, and union will encompass the world, and God will rule forevermore. That is, a spiritual and everlasting sovereignty will be established. Such is the day of God. For all the days which have come and gone were the days of Abraham, Moses, Christ, or of the other prophets. But this day is the day of God, inasmuch as the Sun of Truth will shine forth therein with the utmost intensity and radiance. Verses 16 and 17, quote, "And the 24 elders which sat before God on their seats fell upon their faces and worshipped God, saying, We give thee thanks, O Lord God Almighty, which art and wast and art to come, because thou hast taken to thee thy great power and hast reigned." End quote. In every dispensation there have been 12 chosen ones. In the time of Joseph there were 12 brothers. In the time of Moses there were 12 heads or chiefs of the tribes. In the time of Christ there were 12 apostles. And in the time of Muhammad there were 12 imams. But in this glorious revelation there are 24 such souls, double the number of all the others, for so does its greatness require. These holy souls are in the presence of God seated upon their thrones, meaning that they will reign eternally. These 24 glorious souls, though they are established upon the throne of everlasting sovereignty, nonetheless bow down in adoration to, and are humble and submissive before, that universal manifestation of God, saying, We give thee thanks, O Lord God Almighty, which art and wast and art to come, because thou hast taken to thee thy great power and hast reigned. That is, thou wilt promulgate all thy teachings, gather all the people of the earth under thy shadow, and bring all men together under a single tabernacle. And although sovereignty has always belonged to God, and he has ever been and will forever continue to be the supreme sovereign, the reference in this instance is to the sovereignty of the manifestation of his own self, who will promulgate such laws and teachings as are the very spirit of the world of humanity and the cause of everlasting life. That universal manifestation, Baha'u'lláh, will subdue the world through a spiritual power, not through war and strife. He will array the world with peace and harmony, not with swords and spears. He will establish this divine sovereignty through genuine love, not through military might. He will promote these divine teachings through kindness and amity, not through violence and arms. Even though these nations and peoples are, in view of the divergence of their conditions, the disparity of their customs and characters, and the diversity of their religions and races, even as the wolf and the lamb, the leopard and the kid, and the sucking child and the asp, he will so educate them that they will embrace, consort with, and confide in each other. Racial antipathy, religious animosity, and national rivalries will be entirely effaced, and all will attain perfect fellowship and complete harmony under the shade of the blessed tree. Verse 18, quote, "And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth." End quote. The author then dissects that verse 18 a bit. He discussed some sections independently. Quote, "And the nations were angry, for thy teachings ran counter to the selfish desires of the other nations, and thy wrath is come," meaning that all suffered grievous loss for failing to follow thy counsels, admonitions, and teachings, were deprived of grace everlasting, and were veiled from the light of the Sun of Truth. "And the time of the dead, that they should be judged," means that the time has come that the dead, that is, those who are deprived of the spirit of the love of God, and bereft of that life which is holy and everlasting, should be judged with equity, meaning that each should be raised up according to their worthiness and capacity, and that the truth should be fully divulged as to what depths of degradation they occupy in this world of existence, and how they should, in reality, be accounted among the dead. "That thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great." That is, that thou wilt single out the righteous for thy boundless grace, cause them to shine even as heavenly stars above the horizon of ancient glory, and aid them to show forth such conduct and character as to illumine the world of humanity, and to become the means of guidance and the source of everlasting life in the divine kingdom. "And shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth." That is, thou wilt entirely deprive the heedless, for the blindness of the blind will be exposed, and the sight of them that see will become evident. The ignorance and folly of the exponents of error will be recognized, and the knowledge and wisdom of the rightly guided will be manifested, and thus the destroyers will be destroyed. Verse 19, quote, "And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings, and an earthquake and great hail." End quote. "And the temple of God was opened in heaven." This means that the divine Jerusalem has appeared, and the Holy of Holies has become manifest. Among the people of true knowledge, the Holy of Holies refers to the essence of the religion of God and his true teachings, which have remained unchanged throughout all prophetic dispensations, as was explained previously, while Jerusalem encompasses the reality of the religion of God, which is the Holy of Holies, as well as all the laws, transactions, rites, and material ordinances which constitute the city. That is why it is called the heavenly Jerusalem. Briefly, in the course of the dispensation of the Sun of Truth, the lights of God will shine forth with the utmost splendor, and thus the essence of the divine teachings will be realized in the world of being. The darkness of ignorance and folly will be dispelled. The world will become another world. Spiritual illumination will encompass all, and hence the Holy of Holies will appear. And the temple of God was opened in heaven. This means also that through the dissemination of these divine teachings, the disclosure of these heavenly mysteries, and the dawning of the Sun of Truth, the portals of progress and advancement will be flung open on all sides, and the signs of celestial blessings and bestowals will be made manifest. And there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament. This means that the book of his covenant will appear in his Jerusalem, the tablet of the testament will be recorded, and the meaning of the covenant and testament will become evident. The call of God will resound throughout east and west, and the earth will be filled with the renown of the cause of God. The violators of the covenant will be humbled and abased, and the faithful will attain honor and glory, for they hold fast to the book of the covenant and are firm and unwavering in the path of the testament. And there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail, meaning that after the appearance of the book of the covenant, there will be a great tempest. The lightning of divine anger and wrath will flash. The thunder of the violation of the covenant will break. The tremor of doubt will shake the earth. The hail of torments will rain upon the violators of the covenant, and those who claim to believe will be subjected to tests and trials. In case you missed it, verses 15 through 19, starting with the sounding of the seventh trumpet, the Messiah, he who sits on the throne, the third woe, is making his appearance in the world. These verses include the reactions of the nations and those who may have fear of the judgment of God through this new messenger. The Messiah has made his appearance in the world. The entity titled He Who Sits on the Throne in the book of Revelation has made his presence known in our story. His divine name for this new spiritual era is Bahá'u'lláh, which means the glory of God. It's time to talk about time again. Where are we now in the chronological cycles? Let's see. Hopefully you recall this graphic from the start of the video. The blue outline shows chapter 11 that we just reviewed. It is chronological cycle number 4 all by itself. Here again is the chapter 11 chronological cycle, the fourth out of 7 such cycles in the book of Revelation. Note that verse 14, where the arrow is pointing, announces that the second woe of the second of the 3 manifestations of God that Revelation foretells has left the scene in this cycle. The following verses to the end of the chapter are about the appearance and declaration of He who sits on the throne, the Messiah of the latter days, who we Baha'is believe to be Bahá'u'lláh, the prophet founder of the Bahá'í faith. I have depicted the 7 chronological cycles in the book of Revelation here to remind you of the context of the time cycles. You can see in the middle on the right an arrow pointing to chronological cycle number 4, which is chapter 11 alone. Note that each cycle ends with a purple rectangle, which depicts the presence of the new Messiah, the returned Christ Spirit in the text in those verses. That is, He who sits on the throne, who is Bahá'u'lláh. The beginning of each cycle varies. The second cycle, chapter 6, begins with Judaism. Cycle 3 starts with Judaism again, but cycle 4 drops both Judaism and Christianity and starts with Islam. That is the pure Islam before being defiled by the Umayyads. The cycles rearrange and refocus after the end of each cycle. The next cycle, cycle number 5, will begin with the corrupted version of Islam. That's the light green rectangles. The next video in this series will be video number 8, and it will cover chapters 12 through 14, which is part of the next chronological cycle. Then in video number 9, it will continue that cycle for chapters 15 and 16. So again, cycle number 5 is divided into 2 different videos, videos 8 and 9. So please go on to video number 8 on chapters 12 through 14. To access it, go to my YouTube channel. It's there on the bottom of the slide, Integral Destiny 9, all one word with the number 9 at the end, no spaces. And I'll also put this information in the description of this video. Please note that this video is an amateur production by this singular person, me. It is not an official production of the Baha'i Faith community. Copyright protections are claimed. Please do not make changes, additions, or deletions to this presentation. If you have any questions, please contact me at that email address you see there. And thank you for watching.